Welcome to Independent Green Party, Green TV, the show dedicated to positive New Deal solutions and the candidates who advocate for them. I'm Angela Trusty, your host for today. The show is dedicated to New Deal eco-jobs for the economy and positive Green Party solutions. Eco-capitalism, where prices must tell the environmental truth. The green industrial revolution, solar, wind, geothermal, rail, weatherization, conservation, and efficiency jobs. We focus on building green neighborhoods that are walkable, bikeable, pedestrian, and rail-friendly. Cutting taxpayer subsidies to zero for fossil fuel, big oil, and big auto. Rail built anywhere in America benefits all of America. Since the end of the Reconstruction, there have been a total of 30 U.S. senators, 111 U.S. representatives, and 20 governors elected that weren't affiliated with a major party. There are currently 2 independent U.S. senators, King and Sanders, and 4 non-legacy party major city mayors. Hundreds of third-party office holders exist at the local levels, including those in nonpartisan positions who are affiliated with a third party, including 146 Libertarian Party members and 131 Green Party members. On November 8, 2016, one sitting independent member of the U.S. House of Representatives was reelected, Gregorio Sablan from the Northern Mariana Islands, and 19 Greens were elected in local elections in California, Florida, Michigan, and Minnesota. Today we have with us Audrey Clement, former national co-chair of the Green Party. Hi, Audrey, welcome. Glad to have you with us.
I'm glad to be here.
So tell us about yourself. We're excited to get to learn a little bit about your history and the work that you've been doing. So yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I've been interested in politics for many years. I have a PhD in political science from Temple University, which I obtained in 1993.
Wonderful.
With a focus on voting behavior. And my dissertation was actually a quantitative analysis of the voting behavior of various blocs in Congress with a focus on the Congressional Black Caucus. I was basically measuring the representativeness of various voting blocs in the 100th Congress.
Interesting. I mean, getting a PhD, you can tell from experience the type of dedication and work that takes. So what was your inclination to study voting behavior, and especially in that sort of nuanced area?
My interest in politics derives from a book that I read way back in 1979 about the Borgias, an infamous family of elites in Renaissance Italy, whose exploits were written by a famous 19th century author by the name of Alexander Dumas.
Okay.
And his writing was he's more famous as a novelist, but his historical account of the Borgias was so compelling that I decided to become a freelance journalist. I'm currently, and I was then, employed as a programmer, but I did freelance journalism for a number of years, political journalism, covering politicians in the city of Philadelphia, primarily black politicians, who were then predominantly, they held most of the elective offices. Then I got a fellowship with the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation in 1987. I was down on the Hill for about 6 months. So I got intimately acquainted with the machinations of Congress at that time. And I left the Hill. I returned to Temple to complete my dissertation, but funding was an issue. I had to become reemployed, and so it took me about 12 years to complete the dissertation from the time that I started grad school. By that time, my employability was limited. I went searching for jobs with various pollsters, and they weren't too interested in me. I think they were looking for younger people, but also I had already gone to independent politics. I had already basically become an independent, and I was not happy with either the Democrats or the Republicans way back then.
And I'd love for you to talk about that. One of the things that we have talked about on this show before is that there is a difference between the independent Green Party and the Green Party. So I'd love to know, where is your affiliation, and talk a little bit about what led you there.
I became totally cynical of both political parties. you know, you might say, well, maybe you were cynical because you couldn't get a job, or maybe you couldn't get a job because you were cynical. It's kind of hard to say with any of the established parties. But thereafter, I voted for an independent candidate in every subsequent presidential election. In 2004, there was only a Libertarian on the ballot in the state of Virginia. And I was more inclined to vote Green. So I determined that I would enroll in the Green Party after that election and make sure that there always was a Green Party candidate on the ballot thereafter. And indeed, Green Party candidates have been on the ballot in Virginia in 2008, 2012, and 2016. And I've petitioned to get those candidates on the ballot in each case.
Yeah, that's wonderful. You know, another thing that is talked about in relation to the Green Party is that comment that you've just brought up, like determined to have there be a candidate on the ballot. On the ballot means in the discussion. What evolution have you seen in your time being in politics of the growth of the Green Party and the growth of the Green Party's influence?
Well, actually, the Green Party's influence waned significantly after Ralph Nader's election in 2000 because of the spoiler myth. And the associated contempt expressed by most Democrats for third-party candidates, and of course Republicans also. So the fortunes of the Green Party have waned. My own position has changed. When I joined the party, I agreed with it on all environmental issues and most domestic issues. I disagreed with it on foreign policy issues, but I felt that because the environmental issues were more important to me than anything else, I would subordinate my own position on those issues to promote the environmental plank that I supported.
Okay.
But since that time, I've seen the party move ideologically more to the left. Just as the Libertarians have probably or may have moved more to the right. I don't know. I see definitely that the Greens have moved more to the left.
Okay.
And I can't move with them because my concerns about foreign policy issues are just too strong. So I now describe myself more as a green-leaning independent than a Green Party acolyte. I simply cannot. There are just too many issues mostly of a foreign policy nature that I deviate from the party to call myself a true Green.
Okay, yeah, that's very interesting. You know, I'm sure that there are many people who find themselves sort of in a similar place where they're trying to find someone who aligns with their belief system, which it sounds like you've sort of been on that journey as well. One of the things that I know that I'd love for us to talk about is the fact that you've run for office before, and you know that just takes an incredible amount of courage and bravery to really step out and say, hey, I've got some feelings about things I'd like to run for office. Tell us about that experience, and then also any advice you would give to anyone who is considering running for office. What's it like to be a candidate?
Well, when I joined the Green Party, I did not anticipate running for office. I was very shy about that. I did campaign for other candidates for a number of years, from 2006 through 2010.
Okay.
And also through those 5 years actually, 5 election cycles. And then in 2011, the local Green Party fielded no candidate for the county board race, which is the race that I've always either run in or been interested in running in. So I put my name in the hat, and the local party endorsed me. I ran, as credible a campaign as one could at starting out. My best showings have been about 1/3 of the vote. Okay. This past election, running for county board, I got, I believe, 27% of the vote, which was not what I wanted to get. I wanted to get 32%. Okay. And I wanted to maintain my high numbers from previous elections. Okay. But the county voted overwhelmingly for Clinton, 75%. So basically, they just most voters just pulled the Democratic lever. They were not looking at the at the lower level races. I continue to run for office because I believe there's a constituency out there that is not represented.
I'm just thinking about what that must feel like to be running for office when you feel internally there's a constituency that really needs to be represented. And you've got kind of this internal drive to do that. And one of the things that I think is important for us which we always talk about on this show, is the idea that on the ballot is in the discussion, and therefore that's a win. Did you experience that feeling? Even with the race not turning out how you wanted to, did you experience that feeling?
What was kind of interesting is that one of the things the candidates all have to do within a week of the election is they've got to pull up their yard signs from the medians in Arlington County. And so I was going around pulling up yard signs. People would stop me and say, "Glad you ran."
Yeah, that's wonderful. That's wonderful.
I mean, it happens. I mean, I've actually had people stop their cars and say, "Hey, Clement." First of all, I was shocked that they even knew who I was. Thanks for running.
Yeah.
So it's. But back to the gambling house analogy. Is it fair to a world-class card player to say that he's a loser because the house is rigged? Or the game is rigged by the house? Doesn't sound right, does it?
No. And so what do you say to people, there are other people of any party who want to be politically involved, and they, I'm sure, can have that feeling of, I should stop, I should quit. What is the voice that tells you to keep going? And what advice would you give to others to help them to continue to nurture that voice?
To do it.
It sounds like it's almost a protest in some respects of running.
Yes.
That's very, very interesting. I'm excited. We have some more things that we're going to be talking about. Right now, we are here on Green TV. We are joined with Audrey Clement. We are talking about the Green Party and how the independent Green Party and Green Party can continue to move forward. So again, Audrey, thank you for being here with us. So I'd love for us to switch the discussion and kind of change paths for a few moments and really think about this concept of moving forward. There are a lot of things going on with the Green Party right now. So as you think about where the party is right now, what are some strategies that you would suggest for the party to move forward in a successful way?
I want the party to move to the center. In most other areas of human discourse, the truth is often in the middle. You'll hear it. Most judges think, they hear one side of the story, then they hear the other side of the story, and lo and behold, they find something in the middle. That's where the truth lies. If the truth does lie in the middle, then that's probably why you find so many voters there. Okay? And if the voters are in the middle and the truth is in the middle, there's absolutely no moral reason not to go look there for those votes. The truth is in the middle and the votes are in the center, and that's where the party ought to go.
It's a really interesting thought there. And I guess another question I'd ask you as we are moving away from this election season, you mentioned that the votes are here in the center. What would you suggest to voters that they do sort of in this non-election season for them to be able to lean in and continue to make impacts in their communities? Any advice you'd give to voters?
I agree with Jill Stein's slogan, which is that lesser evilism has brought us all the evil that we fear.
I think that, as we talk about how voters can, in any climate, continue to be impactful in their communities, it seems like you might have some ideas of what they can actually do, like tangibly do. Are there community events that they can get involved in? Are there just ways for them to feel like, hey, my voice is being heard, even off of the election cycle?
Go to the monthly county board meetings.
Okay.
Or if you have kids in the schools, go to the school board meetings.
Okay.
Now, it is the case that most times you will walk away with a feeling that your interests are not well represented. or at least if you're of an independent mind, you will think that. If you're a partisan Democrat or Republican, you'll probably not be as unhappy about doing these meetings. But you will definitely come away better informed.
Mm-hmm. Okay. This is great. This is great content for our viewers to continue to think about as they think about how they can be involved. We're going to pause right here for an update on Dr. Jill Stein's campaign for a recount.
Hello, Dr. Stein. Let me ask you a question. You're pushing for recounts in 3 states. It's Joy speaking, by the way. Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. Now, do you think this can actually overturn the election results? Tell me yes.
So, we don't know, and that's the thing about voting. You don't know unless you look. You don't know unless you actually count the paper ballots. And if you count the paper ballots, then we can be confident about what the number is, and then we'll find out whether there is evidence of tampering, of machine error, and we're using these machines that are quite prone to error, whether there's been hacking, human error. We need to have our confidence restored in what we've got, and we'll see where it takes us. We're not here to help one candidate and hurt another. We're really here to help voters feel like we've got a system that's working for us.
So what exactly are you trying to prove then, if you're not really trying to help one candidate and hurt another? What are you trying
We're looking in 3 states that have some kind of red flags, you could say, because the vote was really, really razor thin.
Yeah.
The results went in the opposite direction of what was expected, and they have problems with their voting systems, like they're using machines that are especially tamper-friendly. They're really easy to make mistakes on or to be hacked.
So why wasn't that corrected?
For all those reasons, we need...
That should have been corrected before the election, no?
Exactly, it should have. And
a day late,
that's
$1
the
short.
Dr. Stein, that is the point.
Yeah.
Thank you. We're on the same page here. And going forward, we need to correct this. This isn't rocket science. We shouldn't have to raise millions of dollars after the fact and jump through all kinds of bureaucratic hoops in order to have confidence that the vote is accurate and that it was secure. This should be built in.
Right.
Well, Audrey, tell us your thoughts on the recount. That's in the headlines right now. I would love to know your take.
I think it's an extraordinarily interesting issue. In fact, it's intriguing. I support it. I support Jill Stein's initiative with one caveat. She ought to pay for it, the actual cost of doing the recounts, as she is required to do by law, unless they do uncover evidence of fraud. At which point, I think, now again, this is something the judge would have to decide, but if the fraud is significant enough, then I believe Stein ought to be reimbursed by the state. The argument being that if fraud occurred under the state's watch, it ought to pay, not the candidate.
And is there any precedent for that?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so. I'm also very interested, or I read it, to me the most definitive thing that I've read on this subject this week comes from Greg Palast, who is a famous author who wrote The Best Democracy That Money Can Buy. He's quite good. He's among the very best. And he interviewed one of the lawyers working on this case who was hired by Jill Stein. His name is Robert, I believe he was hired. His name is Robert Fitzrockis, and he's from Ohio. And he successfully sued the state of Ohio for election fraud in 2004. And that suit resulted in the conviction and incarceration of two election officials. I'm not sure who they were, so I don't dare to speculate who they were. But in any event, he definitely has a track record as an elections lawyer. And this article, which I recommend to all people, it's called The No BS Inside Guide to the Presidential Vote Recount, basically says there are a number of ways in which votes have not been counted. He claims that millions of votes have not been counted. And he goes into the various ways in which these votes are not counted. And one of the most egregious abuses is something called cross-check, which is an operation that identifies voters who are allegedly registered in more than one state. It's software apparently that the states purchase to investigate the voters on their lists. And it has resulted in the purge of many voters who were in fact not registered in both states. In other words, if it simply goes by the similarity of names. And it basically, according to FitRaucus, 54,000 voters in Michigan, which was 5 times Trump's plurality in that state, lost their right to vote based on this unfounded double voter accusation. And he goes on to say in Pennsylvania, 45,000 were purged. So with numbers like that, I think that Stein is totally within her rights to sue.
And how would you say this recount is larger than the election? Because we've heard some talk about people saying, oh well, this is just trying to overthrow an election, and I've heard Jill Stein talk about voter integrity. What's the integrity of the elections, election integrity, excuse me. So how would you say that this recount is larger than just this election? Because cross-check and other methodologies have been used to deprive voters of their rights, and also because those who are deprived of their right to vote are invariably people of color. They get, somehow it has to do with the fact that they get the machines that are least trustworthy in their precincts. Okay.
So there's a social justice. I mean, there are very serious ramifications. But beyond that, I think we need to also realize that in a close election, even in a perfect state, let's just say there was no such thing as cross-check, touch, they're called push and pray screens. It's another issue. A push and pray touch screen is a screen that may not in fact register your vote. Like for example, I have low body temperature. Okay, if I push the screen, it may not register my vote because apparently they're heat sensitive screens, that's how they operate. So even if we didn't have methodologies that were questionable, and these methodologies that we used were totally trustworthy, when you have an election that is as close as the 2016 election, I think that an audit of that election is in order, irrespective of who won.
Okay.
Or any other issue. It should automatically be done.
Very interesting.
When it's very close.
Yeah. Anything else you want to say about this recount? Again, it seems like it's been getting a lot of traction in the news. People are thinking about, well, when should we do a recount? When should not? Anything else would you want to add?
Yeah, they say that Jill Stein is going to get rich, and FitRaucus, according to Palace, FitRaucus laughed at this one. He said the FEC has very strict rules on recounts. The donations for the recount are sequestered in a special account. The big problem is that the cost is somewhat out of her control. In other words, they may go after her. If there are cost overruns, she's going to be liable for them.
Because she's requesting the recount.
Right. So if anything, she should be questioned, was it a prudent decision? In other words, the only criticism I would have on that score is whether it was a prudent financial decision on her part, because she may be in hock for a lot of money. So no, this was not done to get rich. Now, it could have been done to get more publicity. If publicity accorded Jill Stein and the Green Party is the price that must be paid to validate an election, a close election, I think it's warranted. Now, I also think that Hillary Clinton should have initiated the recount. If somebody else like Stein she was clearly not badly affected by her defeat. If she is fit and able to pursue the cause, more power to it. The only serious criticism I have heard of this recount effort is that in Michigan, Stein elected to hire Clinton lawyers to help pursue the case rather than Green Party of Michigan operatives. And as a result of which, the Green Party of Michigan is quite unhappy. I don't know the particulars of that. Like, for example, it could have been, this is pure speculation, that because of the tight timeline, Stein didn't have the time to recruit from her own party rather than the Democrats, who apparently had lawyers on the ground. But that's pure speculation. I don't know. All I know is that that is the only criticism of this effort that I would consider valid. The money thing is not an issue. The publicity thing is not an issue. The need for validation is an issue in a close election. So that's, I support this effort. I definitely have heard what Michigan has to say, and I think that Jill ought to take that under advisement, but that's about it.
Let's have you share the title of this article and the author one more time. You mentioned that it's a critical read for people, for anyone who is thinking about the recount and the impacts of the recount. What's the title of this article?
All right, it's The No BS Inside Guide to the Presidential Vote Recount. And again, The No BS Inside Guide to the Presidential Vote Recount by very famous author Greg Palast, who wrote The Best Democracy That Money Can Buy.
Okay. Any other issues that you would say, hey, as I think about what's near and dear to my heart, this is an issue, just sort of as we wrap things up, that this is an issue that you really care about, that you want to talk about?
Yes. In my career as a candidate in Arlington County, my principal focus has actually been transportation. I'm something of a lightweight transit wonk. So going forward, I would very much like to litigate a lawsuit to stop the conversion of I-395 HOV lanes to hot lanes or express lanes.
Okay.
I spoke to Gail recently about it. I mentioned to her that the environmental assessment that was done, it included only two alternatives: the current alternative, which is called the no-build alternative, and the alternative I just described, which will eliminate the shoulder. I said there were no discussion of any other alternative measures to reduce congestion on I-95. And so I asked her, I said, is commuter rail an option? And she says, yeah, they currently have a train. It started about 6 months or a year ago. Okay, it's VRE rail, and it goes from, I guess, Alexandria to Fredericksburg. Okay, and she said the public is happy with it, but they want more.
So grateful to have had you join us today, Audrey. Really, truly, just really appreciate the conversation that we were able to have. That's it for Green TV today. We appreciate getting to talk with Audrey Clement about her experiences as a candidate, some issues that she is extremely passionate about, and hope that you enjoyed being able to watch and listen as well. Have a very Merry Christmas and a happy holiday. Thank you for joining.